maybe we could go and start potentially with you, Spencer, just explaining a little bit about who you are and what your business does, because it will gives us a nice, I think, a nice input into one of the markets.
Good afternoon. I'm Spencer Wolfe from Tokyo, Japan. I'm a Japanese American. Thank you for smiling. Anyways, and I also appreciate the picture from when I was 19. That's excellent. We run so AINEO Networks we have a product called Circle. So we're mostly a UCaaS provider, but we're not that advanced in Japan, so we don't really say that so much. But we have been we started our business in 2017. We're doing fantastic. Japan's a great market, and I've been enjoying listening to about Japan from the outside perspective. Yeah. It's been entertaining. So, yes.
And we're hoping in this panel to hear the real, actually, when I want to know about Japan, I ask Spencer. So we've done the shortcut and got you here. And Mike, maybe you'd explain a little about yourself and Gamma. A number of people may not know who Gamma are.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mike Mills, Managing Director of Service Provider Gamma. And I guess Gamma are best known in the UK. So in the UK, we're the largest SIP provider with about 40% market share. But I guess it was all born out of kind of a couple of go-to-markets, and you talked about it earlier, but for us, a kind of partner channel go-to-markets at the heart of what we do. The reason we're here is we've just launched kind of networking in Asia Pacific, so we provide PS10 replacement in 28 markets, but we're really focused on service providers and cloud communication providers as our niche, which I think as a carrier is a little bit different to most providers.
And last but not least, Sam, maybe you could explain
what APAC is. I always assume, Matt, that we're sort of the graveyard shift here. So our job is to keep everybody entertained as the cake's kicking in.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're supposed to say crazy things. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of 8x8. We're a global UCaaS, CCaaS, CPaaS, business communications provider, 59 countries, users in blah, 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 160 countries, blah, 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 blah.
Blah, blah, blah. So let's start with a little discussion around the customer. Let's start with the customer and kind of what we're seeing change, and let's start, maybe we could start again with you, Spencer, because we've talked a lot about Japan, and you kind of been in that market for, how many years did you say, 6?
Personally?
Yeah.
Our company's 28 years old, so
yeah.
And I've been there the whole time.
So you've been running a UCaaS, and you've been hearing how tricky it is, but it's really growing very fast. So maybe you could give us your impression of kind of how customer requirement is changing there, what you're really seeing on the ground.
Yeah, so we originally started approaching multinational companies, but now we are mostly Japanese users all around Japan. So in Japan, the regulatory is difficult, but if you speak the language, it's not as bad. So we're mostly Japanese customers. You have to have multiple data centers. It's not like spinning up something in Dallas or somewhere and covering the whole nation, or Sydney and covering the whole nation. So it's been fun. The thing about Japan that's a little bit different, as I went around Sydney, I got here yesterday and saw all the car manufacturers. And of course, you've got the Chinese cars that we don't really have in Japan so much, but you've got a lot of Japanese brands here. And I think it's similar to Japan, where we have, I think the difference between Japan and a lot of, Korea, we do a little bit in Korea, mostly Japan, but a little bit in Korea. But the thing about Japan is we've got 5, 6 manufacturers of, voice equipment, in country. So they've been struggling, and everyone's trying to figure out the next thing. So I've heard a lot of people say immature markets, that it's an immature market, but I don't think Japan is really an immature market. I think it's just timing, because, I could go off on stuff, but yeah, it's a fun market. I'm very excited. I think it's a wonderful time to be in Japan, because basically you've got these 5, 6 manufacturers pulling out. Fujitsu was one of them. They don't manufacture at all. The big N company, very strong in Australia, but they don't manufacture internationally anymore, and that's affected their domestic business. So there's a lot of stuff that people are just thinking now, we have to do something different. So I think it's really, really good timing, whereas the U.S. is more advanced than us, I think.
So still was quite premise-centric because of those manufacturers. Is that the reason, or is there other reasons why? Is it more, how would you think about in that cloud transition?
I think it's accounting a little bit, because you buy a PBX and you don't really think about apps or any add-ons, and you just think, it's a phone on the desk. So I think it's an accounting issue where they want to write it off, and so they don't want to buy anything. One of the other things I should mention is that Japan, we don't really have BroadSoft was bought by Cisco, and then we rolled up. Basically we took all their users because we had our platform's very similar. What happened was there is a lot of open source, which is very strange because Japan is not really known for a lot of Linux people, but a lot of open source providers. So there's a lot of all sorts of services. So in an organization we're involved with, there's like 50 or 60 small CSPs that are all open source, various mobile apps, and it's all kind of a hodgepodge.
And thinking about the customer, what are you seeing any changes? Are they demanding AI? What are your customers demanding? Are you seeing any change in? Are they in that sort of cloud? We want what we had on premise and cloud, or are they going? Is there kind of a next iteration of what they're wanting? Are you seeing a?
I think some people are marketing IVRs as AI. I always thought press 1 for sales, press 2 for support, and press 3 for billing was not AI, but some people market it as AI. But so we are seeing people doing a little bit more with their setup on the voice side of things, So I think that the market is evolving, and I think the people, their systems are getting old, so they're wanting to replace. There's a boatload of small companies that are marketing products that are all over the place. So it's really in an interesting state. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I'm really interested always to hear about that market because it's kind of one of those, as you say, had that all those big manufacturers there. It's kind of an odd dynamic, really. It's kind of really. It's a big market as well, yeah.
It's got a bit of a feel of Germany about it from a European perspective with that heavy industrial manufacturing angle. And, I think there's interesting synergies given that still in Europe's the least advanced from a cloud point of view.
Yeah, and so Mike, Gamma, you've got two hats really. Your hat, which is you're supporting service providers, your wholesale offerings, and so you're seeing what they're asking from you. And then there is what Gamma, the kind of the resale business is doing in UK and Germany mainly, but in other European markets. So if you could give me a couple of angles from that we were seeing from a customer.
Yeah, so if we look at the sort of cloud comms market, I think there's a bunch of things going on. I think as the regulatory landscape gets harder, and Europe's no different, frankly, it's yes, there's one common set of regulation, but it's all interpreted differently. So the way the Germans interpret it versus the Swedish version is completely different, and the French are just typically difficult. There's no French people here, thankfully. I think we're far enough away. So
there is actually some French people here. I don't know if is Axel in the room? There. He's kind of French.
Sorry, I've offended one person.
He was really born in Germany, but he claims to be French.
So I've offended the German and the French so far. Typically British. So I think what we're seeing in those providers is a consolidation exercise where they're trying to reduce operational costs by picking providers that they can work with who are deeply compliant in markets so that they can kind of reduce the overhead. And we see that generally across the board. I think just as that gets tighter and more difficult, the kind of people that were doing it in a slightly grey way are having to get much more compliant. So we're seeing that. And I think the other kind of interesting trends, I know we talk about minutes and decline, but actually in certain markets, we're seeing it grow exponentially. And I think Sam will kind of be this, where it's a CX type environment, actually voice and DID minute and usage is growing exponentially year on year, month on month. And that's really where the growth's coming. If we look at our kind of UCAS base, and we're running about 1 million users in the UK, mobile minutes are staying broadly flat, actually. Landline minutes, international minutes declining 17% year on year. So if you're in the IDD business, you probably need another market in 5 years. I think landline's declining slowly, but I think we've talked about the sort of voice AI bit. I think that's driving a bunch of things. It's driving a greater requirement for people to actually physically run the network to a scale where you can support it properly. But then you've got all the kind of usage values and opportunities that exist in that. So I think we're seeing those trends really driving that market change. In terms of the kind of partner MSP go-to-market, I think that's in a fundamental state of flux. So you've got kind of, certainly in pretty mature markets, you've got a whole plethora of vendors that all do the same thing. You end up kind of differentiating, I think, on more and more. Now, for those MSPs, it's about choice. So we see that in our business that, we've got 5 products from a single vendor from us in market to serve a different set of business requirements. And then more and more, it's about kind of what the partner does on top of that, I think, to drive value. And, one of the challenges is just, if you look at the telco partners, as you might call them, the classic ones, there's a jump between kind of what they're used to selling, which is a package which is unlimited and full, to a much more complicated, fully integrated, outcome-based solution for a business that's delivering tangible value. And I think that dynamic is kind of, you're seeing more and more of that IT MSP community who are much more used to a consulting engagement, getting more value out of voice almost as an add-on, which changes the dynamic of how you support those partners and take them to market.
We're going to touch a little bit more on that, I think. But Sam, maybe from what you're seeing, you operate in, I can't remember how many countries you said.
Loads.
Lots.
Many
countries. But
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it was blah, blah, blah.
But what is the kind of major customer changes you're seeing?
I love what you're talking about here today, Matt. And I think you nailed it this morning when you talked about it. Because here's what I see. What I see is, for 40 years, voice communications and on-prem PBXs, et cetera, and a base at the customer, the employee at the customer aged with the on-prem, right? Like my average, when I go into a multinational, the guy I'm talking to is 55, 60 years old, grew up on
still young.
He's still young, grew up on a Avaya, whatever, and then he's like, AI. What? And we come in and we struggle with this. We come in and we start wanting to talk about, well, it's this piece, and you need to integrate the network, and you need to have the bot, and you need to have the agent controlling this, and it's agentic, and it's this. And their heads explode. And what they want from their vendors and what they want from their partners is come in with an outcome, come in with a solution that solves a specific problem. And you said it this morning at 9:15 a.m., they'll pay for integration. And we as an industry are struggling with this. We all walk in and we want to pitch them part of the solution and make them integrate, but they don't know how. We barely know how in Silicon Valley to integrate this stuff. And I've got, 750 software developers working full time. You're going into a department with one developer who's trying to put this stuff together, and we as an industry need to step up and find common grounds. I think we should take a page from the networking industry, right? They had the IEEE, which said, hey, we're going to have 802.11 and 802.3, and we're going to have Ethernet, and it's going to be standard, and it's going to work. And you plug a Cat5 cable into a switch, and it automatically works. We lack that today, and that is why we see this whole McKinsey saying 93% of AI deployments are failing, because we're dumping a pile of Lego blocks into a customer's hands, and they don't have instructions to make the X-Wing fighter.
I do think you've got a seller problem, and it's not unique, right? It's a kind of, most of the selling in telco started life saying, do you want to buy the incumbent less 20%, right? That's how they made their money.
100%.
And from then it was, do you want to buy a bundled package with everything included? And you're now saying, do you want to solve a specific outcome with a complex toolkit that is pretty unique to a specific business? And they're just struggling to get their heads around how you monetize that and do it in a way that's sustainable in their business. So I think we've got to kind of look at ourselves and say, how do we take the partner community on that journey as operators and providers?
I agree 100%. I think we have a big responsibility. I think the people in this room have a big responsibility. And I think this is why micro-verticalization, or hyper-verticalization, as you like to call it, it is taking off. It's not taking off because it differentiates. It takes off because the customer looks at it and goes, okay, you actually have a complete solution for me. You're not handing me Lego blocks, you're handing me the toy I can play with in a complete solution. I will open my wallet to you because you actually have a solution I can deploy.
I'll raise one quick point, and I wouldn't mind your perspective. So one of the things we've definitely seen in the UK from a service provider point of view is the ones that vertically integrate deeply are winning disproportionately larger than a generalist SME UCAS business. And it doesn't have to be big business, right? We're talking vets, we're talking doctor surgeries. These aren't big deployments, they're less than 20 users. But it's that depth that really matters. But I'd love a sort of Japanese perspective on it, because I think we can talk about Western markets, but it'd be great to hear that sort of perspective.
Well, so it's interesting. You talked about Germany being like Japan, and I think I asked a Lufthansa flight attendant, a Japanese flight attendant, do you think the Germans are like the Japanese? Because sometimes we're too detail-oriented. And I think my German friends, maybe the same thing. have to ask. But anyways, where the forest for the trees thing, and I think sometimes it's that way. But I think the market is growing. But we are seeing. I'm originally from Seattle, Washington, which is the land of Microsoft, and we are seeing that the big Japanese multinationals going towards Teams. So I've heard a lot of mention here of SMEs, and of course, I think a lot of people recognize that SMEs are easy to close, whereas a big Teams installation is going to take a while to get, all the sign-offs, especially if it's a big shipping company or a big manufacturer or something like that. But yeah, the market has definitely changed, and it's definitely, with all of these manufacturers kind of out the door, it's like, what do we go to next?
Are you seeing the integration piece and vertical piece coming there yet? Are you seeing?
It's more simple. It's more like AI equals. So I was asking Tollring, hey, can I record something in Japanese and can I get the text? And then we don't have WhatsApp. We can't spell WhatsApp, but we have Line. I can spell Line, but Line is the kind of the chat service in Japan that's very very popular. Everyone, including the grandmas, have Line, and so do you want to have the multi-channel call center?
Omnichannel.
Omnichannel. Thank you. I'm remembering my English, with a Line integration as well as everything else. In Japan, we have a fax service called Quick Fax, and it's super popular. And I haven't sent a fax. The last time I sent a fax was to change my address with my bank in the U.S. Because it was the verification way. But it's funny how some stuff is staying. Fax in, like all the lawyers, the Tokyo District Court. We have basketball teams, all sorts of places that you wouldn't think would be. So definitely you have to be aware of the niche markets. But I've heard in the U.S. actually fax is still alive in
Healthcare.
Yeah.
Healthcare is huge. We have customers that send 3 million faxes a month. And it's all e-fax. There's no paper being used, but it's all, it's for the healthcare, because the back-end systems for healthcare were all based on fax.
So if we kind of move a gear, so we're seeing a kind of a integrated customer world, and you'll kind of get slightly different, but it's more simple there, but it's coming. So that transition is coming. What is that leading to in terms of the structure of the kind of market to serve that? And how does that make the people in this room change over time? If we think about, what does that mean, for the channels we use, for us, when I say us, I'm not actually a service provider, but I feel like I'm one of you.
Welcome to the family.
How are you thinking about it might change?
I'll take a shot at answering that, Matt. I think if you're in this room, you have to think seriously about going one of 3 directions. If you're an ILEC, your specialty is going to be physical infrastructure. If you're a channel provider, you're either going to go integration via the network or verticalization. And what I mean by network, so for example, we have a shipping company, a very large one. Everyone would see their containers around here any given day, that runs Microsoft Teams in 40 countries through us. And when I ask the head guy, hey, why do you run this through us? And he's like, 1 carrier contract. I no longer we figured out that we have to have 18 carrier contracts. If we get rid of you, 1 carrier contract, as long as you don't gouge me on price, we'll keep going with you. And so we've integrated out having to have 18 different carrier contracts regionally. 1 invoice. Or you go the route of saying, Weave Communications, you mentioned this morning, dental offices, or somebody else mentioned car dealerships and the DMS systems, Techion, rentals, et cetera, right? You either go the route of being that perfect solution. But I think that wildly horizontal, we provide voice to every desktop, that market is the one that's failing, because voice, line, fiber, signal, WhatsApp, are all part of a greater business communications platform. And they have to be integrated somehow with the other
But you've
pieces.
got to make a choice.
You've got to make a choice.
You've got to back up a route. You can't be sitting here in 5-10 years and still having that conversation, we don't think. Or should I have moved? Maybe.
We also have the trouble with the mobile phone, right? Mobile phones taking all of our traffic.
Yep.
So that's a challenge that we all have, probably in most countries. I would guess.
I would think so.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a big deal that we have to think about. So what can you sell that's value added? Well, you want to know what your salespeople are doing every day. In Japan, the older generation, I wouldn't include myself in that, of course, since I'm so young in that picture. But the older generation would carry 2 phones, so they'd have one for work and one for personal. But the younger generation is like, no, thank you. So I think if you're marketing in Asia, then you have to say, hey, you don't have to carry, you got an app, so use our app, put it in your personal phone, but then how do you firewall it and make sure that you keep company data?
But I mean,
separate?
yeah,
Sorry.
I think FMC, you analysts love talking about FMC, right? Everyone I talk to FMC,
I don't know if I love talking about FMC. I've been talking about it for about 15 years.
So we probably
I'm not
spent
sure I
10 million
love.
quid building up and buying a platform to do it. 5 years sales effort, 4,000 users. Analysts love it. End users don't love it, generally speaking. Outside of the markets where it's native, the Nordics, it's pretty native. And Spain, apparently.
You think with eSIM now coming on board, the fact you can have eSIMs on iPhone 16, 17, 18 so easily, it may not see a resurgence?
I don't know. So I'm an FMC skeptic. I want to love it, right? Because I love the technology, but getting it to work properly with a mobile network, coming back to you kind of when it's mobile first, they hold those keys really tight. So if you want to do properly deep integration, you need to be running a core network pretty much.
I was calling out my French friend from InReach at the back here. I was with his French friend Bertrand, who's a very good friend of mine, who's my source of French information. And he was saying recently in the French market, they're having an upsurgence finally of FMC. And the reason is they've got a very good use case. And the use case is we want to know what our salespeople are doing. And the salespeople are on the mobile phone, and it's not integrated to the CRM, and they don't know what's going on. And now why it's suddenly upturning in France is two reasons. One, there's been a change in the structure of the market so that an MVNO is now available and financially viable where it wasn't for years, and eSIM technology making it easier to deploy. So I do think there is a change. I'm, in the space, but there are a couple of kind of things that we're seeing, and that you seem to be saying a similar use case in Japan.
Yeah. Also, so the two mobile phone thing. I mean, if you're in the company that owns the Japanese company that owns the Financial Times. Nikkei, they, for example, everyone has to have, you have to completely separate device, everything has to be separate. Whereas, I mean, the SMEs and the majority of other people is like, we want to save money. We don't want to spend $2,000-$3,000 a month on mobile phones, so let's go to the app.
I do think there's a sort of interesting paradigm, bizarre paradigm, and extensively in the UK, where the quality of voice running OTT apps now versus the native mobile dialer is a better user experience than trying to get a phone call through on the mobile network. So we've basically flooded it with capacity, and they can't keep up with the kind of data demands, which means that the quality of service on the basic kind of old school mobile number service is even worse. If I'm at home, I'll use WhatsApp or I'll use Teams or anything else other than the dialer.
No line.
If I can just add one small thing. If you listen to this conversation, the thing I always take away is you got to take a step back. Imagine a customer sitting in the room right now, their heads would explode. They're like, look, we don't understand half of what you just said. Can you just either sell us something that works or tell us it doesn't work and we'll go buy something else with our money? But really that you either got to vertically figure it out or horizontally figure it out inside of a vertical or something, but it's got to in the end solve a customer problem, especially in a world where everything's moving to more consumption-based pricing and we only get paid if it actually gets used.
And I think the other thing I was thinking about structurally is from an M&A, I talked about scale earlier, one of your choices. It's similar to what you were saying. And we've certainly seen some acquisitions in the US and other places where people are looking for scale. In UK, we had a lot of big MSP roll-up that took place over about 3 years, which has now slowed down, actually, interestingly enough. But how important is scale going to be in this game? So, do we think, possibly if you've taken the niche route, maybe not. I mean, maybe scale isn't the most important. But if you're in the core kind of UCaaS or is scale an issue? Spencer, do you sit there and think I need a scale or
You're talking about for the customer or for?
No, for you. So I'm now thinking about the market, the industry. So what's going to happen? From a service provider point of view, do you feel like scale is important to your strategy? Do you need a scale to keep competing, or?
I think everybody likes to buy from who they know and who they like, so you need to be known. And the issue in Japan and Korea is behind Japan. We do a little bit in Korea, but in Japan, there's so many unknown companies, ABC Telecom or whatever, and so if you're a small company and you're just one or two users, then maybe you don't care. But if you're a big name, it's like, I've never heard of you. Are you going to be around next week? And so I think scale is important. I mean, our goal for our business, we're not a huge company, but we're working on trying to acquire 1 to 2 companies a year, to roll them in, because we believe that we do need to aggregate. We've got salespeople that are great. We've got a great platform, got a great brand that's been around a long time. But the thing is, we need to speed it up. So how do you do it? Well, one of the ways is acquiring. But then again, you have issues like in Japan, Korea. I've heard it's bad in the Netherlands as well. We could ask Stefan. But the labor law and all sorts of local things that you have to think about. When Musk purchased Twitter, he was going to close the Japan office, but then he heard about labor law in Japan, so didn't happen.
And Mike, you guys have gone through quite a bit of, scale, and but it's also hurting you a little bit in the UK, if I was to say that the MSPs who were your big partners have scaled and stagnated to some degree. So
yeah, I think my kind of perspective is you probably have to be big enough to drive an economic scale that delivers value and robustness and scalability and reliability and governance and all the things that you need to operate. But in terms of that very specific point, yeah, that the UK kind of MSP market's rapidly consolidated, which is great for them. But when you provide services to all of them, part of the business case is a 10% synergy on the carrier cost or the platform cost, right? So they come into it expecting to cut your cost by 10%, but that has slowed down. So I think you probably have to be at a certain size, I think, to be meaningful. I think it matters a bit less at the lower end of the market where it's more of a lifestyle or it's a very regional focused play. But fundamentally, if you want to get anything above 50 users, probably, you've got to be at a scale as an organization to meet that. And I think the sort of surprising thing is just how complex some of those businesses are. I think the average size of a business that now does international is 40 users. That's an SMB, right? But they've got multinational requirements, which then comes with a load of complexity. More and more are in regulated environments. So you end up having to sort of build an enterprise-grade service to sell to a SME in a lot of scenarios just to meet those expectations. But I think there's definitely a balance of kind of, you don't want to be at the far end of the kind of scale challenge because you just get unwieldy and difficult, but you need to be agile enough to, and when I'm on about kind of tier 1 network size scale, I think at that level, just getting any change through a business is challenging.
So I'll try to give you a quick answer. Look, we're $715 million. I got 750 developers, and I do 3,000 software releases a month. Man, I'd like to be $1.5 billion. Right? Because I'd like to have I'd like to do 6,000 software releases a month. I'd like to have more money in DevOps, more money in security, more development teams, et cetera. But we build software that we sell in a whole bunch of countries around the world. And so that think globally but act locally takes a lot of R&D dollars, takes a lot of sales and marketing dollars, and scale really helps that. But I think this gets back into you have to know what your ICP is, and you have to know what you want to be when you grow up. We want to be a big company that offers business communications to multinationals around the world and small and medium-sized businesses around the world. And to do that, you just need raw horsepower.
Yeah, so maybe that moves us on to our kind of long-term strategy differentiation, and we talked about the kind of choices you might take. You spoke about it, Sam. But just if we were sitting here as APAC provider, what advice do you think we give them in terms of what they should be thinking about, where they should go? One, we said you should take a choice. It's time to make a choice.
So, I mean, the way I would view it is if you're sitting in the market, depending on who you are in the APAC market, you should partner with a company like us, 8x8. We build a business communications platform. It has a lot of capabilities. It has a lot of built-in integration, and you bring it custom for your needs in your markets. We generate a vast majority of our business through channels because of customer intimacy. If I'm a large multinational company selling in a whole bunch of countries around the world, I can't be locally intimate with every single customer. That's what I happily pay my channel partners to do. And I will pay you lots of money to do it, is be that conduit for us. We'll give you the platform. We'll give you the capabilities. You bring it locally to solve customer problems.
Okay, so you think it's going to be less for a lot of people about running platforms and trying to compete at that level. You're going to leave that to
I just don't see
who are going to do that. good for you.
Yeah, but if you're running an Asterix platform sitting in Sydney here and you're trying to do a little Claude vibe coding on the side with, no sovereignty and no security platforms and no whatever, how are you going to survive long term, right? That just doesn't, you should partner with us or one of our competitors or whatever and take that platform and customize it and bring it to the final mile to your customer. I just don't see how you want to compete. I have more Claude Code licenses. I probably have enough Claude Code licenses in this room combined almost.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So I would. So we're in Japan, and we have a lot of people that want terminations in Japan, and regulatory is really fun in Japan, in a very sarcastic sense. So we can help with that, but we have a lot of people where we're terminating endpoints with. So we're not as cool as 8x8, but at least we have a lot of we've got European fashion brands, and that need a store phone. A decked phone in the corner, or and then we've got other brands that a lot of manufacturers, they just want an endpoint, and it's back down to the one invoice thing. So of course,
but I think that's amazing, right? Because you know your market, you know exactly how to solve your customer problems, and after you're done deploying, they probably have a smile on their face.
Yeah, so we've got European service providers like us that are connecting with us, and then we just give them the phone numbers, and we make sure that they're compliant, because we're the ones that are going to take the heat from the regulators if something happens. And so they can sell it as their service. I see both ways. I think there's also a debate, because we've talked about, we have what we call our, what do you say in English? We have our sales partners, which are distributors, I guess you would call them. We use the word sales partner, and we tell them, you're going to have to sell it as our brand, but I wonder how much more could we sell if we rebranded it, if we white labeled it? How much more would we sell? And I see different companies doing well, and others saying, "Hey, no, if it's our brand or no brand." So I don't know. I'm not sure what the debate is. I mean, what's the better way to get more market share?
Mike, just imagine service provider doesn't say I want to buy wholesale services. I want to use you for my. They should be coming to me, by the way. But let's say they go to you and they say, "What should our strategy be in the future to differentiate?"
So I think one of the things we're seeing. So we've got in kind of most markets, we've probably now got 4 UCaaS platforms that we offer to our partners, and I think you're at a point now where it's sort of pick the one that fits the best requirement, and then go with that. I know you guys have got a single platform approach, but we've kind of gone the other way, broadly through acquisition, by the way, where we've got a micro product that's specifically designed for that niche, and then we've got one that'll do FMC, and then we've got kind of the broad line Cisco type capabilities. And certainly one of the resurgences we're seeing, I think, is kind of people taking back and going with a brand-led sale rather than a white label sale, actually, and saying, actually, the technology's Cisco, it's someone else, or it's 8x8, and being upfront about that, and then really focusing on kind of the go-to-market and the kind of either the deep customer knowledge, or in some cases, what we see is just the breadth of, they're in every corner of the country, and they're mates with everyone on the road, and it's kind of that local GTM, I think, that really has got long-term value to those partners, because they're just known in a region.
Yeah. Has anybody got a question before I close? Anybody like to ask a question of the panel? No? I find Oz is normally a very talkative, but not today.
It is close to beer time.
It is close to beer time, I accept that. Okay, no questions. All right. So I think we have really covered the area. Thank you so much, guys, for your input. We'll be hanging around, so if anybody has any questions which you're shy to ask in a group but want to ask individually, please find the team. But on that note, I'd like everybody to thank my panel. Fascinating conversation.